How often have you felt restricted to spiritual practices that often seem outdated and of little relevance in today's world? Are you discouraged to express your own creative talents and develop spiritual practices that are uniquely you? The Liturgical Rebels podcast is for people like you who want to reimagine and reconstruct their faith and spiritual practices. It's for those who want to reshape belief and journey closer to God's wholeness with peace, justice, and flourishing, not just for themselves, but for the earth and all its inhabitants. In today's episode of Liturgical Rebels, I will be in conversation with Weldon Nisly, currently part-time with the Christian Peacemaker Teams involved in Iraq, Kurdistan, and Palestine. He retired from pastoral work at the end of November 2013, but his retirement is devoted not just to his own grandchildren, but to all the grandchildren of the world, through contemplative just peace building and writing about just peace and non-violent action that confronts war and seeks to abolish war. The work that Weldon is involved in is incredibly important as we live in a world where war and violence are more and more common, and we need people like him who are not only seeking for solutions, but who are being advocates in some of the most violent parts of the world. Weldon, it's a delight to finally get a chance to chat with you here on Liturgical Rebels. I think this is the third attempt because of various reasons. So, but I've really been looking forward to this. Your involvement both as a pastor and particularly in peacemaking is something that has interested me for a long, long time. So welcome to Liturgical Rebels.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Christine. It is a gift, an honor, and a delight for me too.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, and before we get into the peacemaking side of things, give us a little of your background, because most people don't know who you are. Most of our audience doesn't know.
Yeah,
So
right.
give us some of your background.
Thank you. Yes. You would have to go back as far. I've been in ministry for well over 50 years now. But my earliest adult life and intention, thought my life calling, was in political organizing. I grew up on a farm in Iowa and grew up this rural Mennonite, very sectarian, conservative community. But I knew from a very early age I wouldn't be a farmer, and the city and the world were my home, and went to University of Iowa and studied political science and economics and became a political organizer. But it was in the late 60s, early 70s, when I was at the University of Iowa and doing political organizing. Vietnam, civil rights, the death of Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy and Malcolm X and John F. Kennedy as president, all of those had a massive impact on me at a young age. And I became somewhat disillusioned and discovered in the Mennonite world, we had a Mennonite Central Committee MCC Peace Office. We had a Washington office. There were people who cared about what I did, but in the church. And in 1973, September 1 of 73, made a massive switch from being a political organizer, and at that time I was working in poverty ministries under the governor of Iowa's office, and so to ministry, to working along in doing poverty ministry things, but alongside our peace office and alongside our Mennonite voluntary service office, and then realized my calling was as in ministry, in peace ministry. I did not begin as a pastor, think about that. And then went to, in mid-70s, to the Associated Mennonite Biblical Seminary and got a peace studies degree. My master's degree is in peace studies. Did my thesis in went to Columbia. Did my thesis in this was the emerging stages of liberation theology to help make sense of all of the political context of theology in the church, and then became worked for Mennonite Central Committee Peace Office for some years, then became a pastor, was a pastor for 11 years at Cincinnati Mennonite Fellowship, and then almost 2 decades at Seattle Mennonite Church. But it was always at the intersection of peace and pastoral ministry that connected what I call seminary, sanctuary, and street. If I had retained more of my farming context that added soil, because that's important too, but with the seminary, sanctuary, and street with both a local and immediate community context and a national context and a global context. So I've done, even as a pastor, an enormous amount of traveling all over the world for peace ministry reasons, with Mennonite Church, with peace groups, with Mennonite World Conference, and so on. So it's always been sort of in that local to global context of doing ministry. The 40 years ago, I would end with this because Community Peacemaker Teams is such an important part of my life now. 40 years ago is very much a part of the origin in 1986 of then Christian Peacemaker Teams that became Community Peacemaker Team, and now have connected with that, and now spent the last year since retirement, have spent pretty much of my life with CPT, Community Peacemaker Teams, in a variety of places. I can talk about that if you want, but in leading delegations and being on team and doing that. I am currently now in my 80s serving as I have a lot of connections with our CPT teams in the Middle East and in Colombia and in Canada and on the U.S.-Mexican border. But my role now, my official responsibility, is as co-chair of the CPT governing board and chairing, helping co-lead. And we're doing a major restructuring and calling two new key leaders, and so on. So I'm working virtually full time in that sort of transition and transformation process for CPT for the future. So that's a little bit.
I always love it when I always love it when I see people who are as passionate in their 80s as they were in their 20s for what they're doing, often more passionate.
Yes.
And I know that, this is definitely the passion that drives you, but there is another passion, I know, and I hadn't planned to talk about this, but I think it's important. And you're very interested also in liturgy, and particularly the interaction of liturgy and peacemaking. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I learned long ago, actually in a major way while I was a political organizer in the 60s, early 70s, before ministry, I learned that what we're called to do, I needed to pay attention to that and believe passionately in that. But it's not my own doing and being and resources. That we had to be grounded in a spiritual community and in a faith community. And that had everything to do with a worshiping community. That I say is always more than the sum of its parts and more than our own intentions. So one of the things I try to do at Seattle Mennonite Church is to begin worship or to identify that God brought you here. We aren't here in this gathering this morning just because we made the decision to get out of bed and go to church. Something beyond ourselves, deeper than ourselves, brought us together, and then something happens to us when we're together that makes us into the body of Christ, so that we can go out into the world and encounter and engage wherever we are, however we are, whatever it is we're called to do and offer and be in the world, so that our coming to church and worshiping together is not so that I get something out of it. It's to help form and shape us so we know who we are and how we are to be in the world in our own personal ways, but also communal ways. So that would be a little bit of the context for.
Okay, good. Wonderful. Now, is there a biblical verse or a concept that you feel most speaks to the whole area of peacemaking?
Yes, a lot. But the two places I probably go to ground what I believe that means is in the Deuteronomist, in the Torah, the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, in Deuteronomy 30 it's so clear and so central that God has set before us life and death, blessing and curse, and that we are to choose life so that we and all children creation may live. So that's one deep grounding. And then, of course, beginning in the Hebrew Scriptures, the great commandment to love God with heart, soul, strength, mind, and neighbor as self. And then, of course, Jesus added to that, and love your enemies, which is biggest and hardest of all. Which takes me to Jesus in the Gospels. I mean, Christina could talk about for more than an hour just on this. All the Gospels have been formative for me, and Luke is the Gospel I live in most deeply because it follows that trajectory so well from the prologue of Luke saying, I'm writing this so that you may know the truth concerning the things about which you have been instructed. And then the very next words are in the days when Herod was king of Judea. So it immediately reminds us, tells us, we live in a political context that's bigger than all of this. And then, of course, all these things unfold with the songs, the announcement, and Luke does it so brilliantly. The Jesus launching ministry with Isaiah's, the prophets, scripture about the Spirit is upon me to be and do all of this. But a key part in the center of Luke's gospel, in the way we follow Jesus and where Jesus takes us, is Jesus sets his face toward Jerusalem. And then half of the gospel, from chapter 9 to 19, is that journey to Jerusalem, to the heart of imperial powers. And then and it's teaching, formation all along the way about why Jesus is going to Jerusalem, why Jesus is taking us there. That's both particular and specific, but it's also metaphorical for the journey of life. And then Jesus weeps over Jerusalem, saying, would that you knew the things that make for peace, and enters into Jerusalem. There's so much we could say about that. And of course, then is the sacrificial victim. But it doesn't stop there. There's a resurrection and a new life. And then Jesus comes back into that with calling people to, yes, into that, and reveals himself always with blessing and peace, reminding, peace be with you. Do not be afraid. Peace be with you. Do not be afraid. It's the parallel. So what we're not to do is the parallel to who we are to be and what we are to do. Love. So love and do not fear. And then the final word is as Jesus leaves this earth in this particular manifestation, is to bless them and say, you are my witnesses. And the Greek word for witness, of course, is martyr witness. this is all you have to live this. This is you embody this. So that's what I see as the and that takes us back actually to the liturgy, is we keep being formed in grounded and formed in community, in worship, in liturgy, in prayer, and so that we embody it and live it in the world every day, on the street, and in the wherever we are. So
Wonderful. Wonderful.
yeah.
Now, I think that the most recent trip you did overseas was to Iraq and Kurdistan. Is
Yes.
that right?
That is correct.
I'm hoping that when I'm 80, I still have the energy to go to Iraq and Kurdistan. But can you tell us a little bit about, that trip, and what it was that you were able to accomplish while you were there?
Yeah, there's so much in that. The background of that is this is the CPT, the Community Peacemaker Team, Iraqi Kurdistan team. So it's in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, which is the northern region of Iraq, a Kurdish area, but it's very much a part of Iraq. I had been there previously in 2014 and 2010, in Iraq in 2010 and 2003. That's a longer story than we can tell here. So I served on the team from 2017 to 2022, half time. So I spent half the year there on the team. And then because of age and health and my wife's health and different things, left the team but still connect with it, and then went back to last fall to lead a delegation and help the team again. So we hadn't had a delegation since the one that I led in 2022 when I was still a teammate, for a lot of reasons. And so I wanted to help find out if there were people still interested in going there with us, and how we introduce them to what CPT does in the Kurdish context, which is fairly unknown. So that was the first and primary task I had there, the first 3 weeks of my time. But I spent 6 weeks there in September, in October, November last fall. And then just help the team out with a lot of other things, because it's so familiar and so much at home that I can just come and join the team on the first day and know exactly what's happening and how we're doing things. And the teammates that I'd been with. I've had the great honor and blessing, a side note here, is to say that most of our teammates, most of CPTers, are in their 20s and 30s. So I have the great, from all over the world, I have the great joy of working with people who are less than half my age. This is the way I describe them. We talk a lot about this. They're mostly disaffected Christians and Muslims who've left institutional religion, but are profoundly, they thought they'd given up on religion, but are profoundly, deeply spiritual. Because we find, again, this work is not sustainable without some grounding, some sense of the spirituality. So we talk and deal with that a lot, and I'm always a pastor, and the presence is. I mean, that's they tell me all the time is, we feel better and we do better when you're here with us.
And what kind of work exactly do they do?
Okay, so there are two major areas of the team. And then I can remind me, and I'll come back to one story about this last fall of the many stories. CPT goes where it's invited by local people to accompany them who are impacted by war. That was the first task. So our first and major responsibility is, this is still the ongoing war on terror. That's another long story, which really is always a war of terror with dominant powers. That's a whole thing I'm working on for a PowerPoint presentation, and want to do that back at Seattle Mennonite Church sometime.
Wonderful.
The ongoing war on, because the Kurdish resistance movement in the mountains, there are 40 to 50 million Kurds in eastern Turkey, northern Iraq, western Iran, and northeastern Syria
Wow.
without a nation. And they're people
Mhm.
who
Mhm.
are oppressed by all four of those countries, especially Turkey and to some extent Iran. And so there's the resistance movement to that is called PKK. That stands for Kurdish word. Um, and they are labeled as terrorist group, not only by Turkey, but by the United States and by the UK and by the European Union, insanely so. But they are, which means they're always the opposition. And so this underground
Mhm.
movement is being attacked. But these are villagers up in the mountains. And so it impacts everything that happens. Turkey is occupying more and more of that region of Iraq, moving
Mhm.
across the border into Iraq, and attacking with fighter jets, with the helicopter gunships, with artillery, with drones. And as they do that, CPT is the only international peacemaking human rights agency accompany them in documenting what's happened. So everybody,
Mhm.
including every embassy and all over the world, but mostly in the European Union and even at the U.S., have been in the U.S. embassy there many times. It uses our documentation about human rights
Mhm.
violations. So one major arena is around war and the impact on Kurdish civilians to that. Um, and the other one is then because it's a war on terror and all of that is operative, there's severe Kurdish oppression, the Kurdish regime of any activists and journalists who resist or write about it. So we accompany everybody
Mhm.
who's arrested in prisons. That's a long, long story. Dear, dear, dear friends who are in prison. One of our dearest journalist friends is seen as a prime leader. He's been in his home with his wife and four little children in 2019. And months after we were there, 10 armed men broke into the house in the middle of the night and put a bag over his head, arrested him, and took him away. And he's still in prison while his children were growing up.
Wow.
Um, and so we're accompanying and documenting everything that happens. And then we're also in every time there's a trial in a court case, we're accompanying and reporting on that and doing
Mhm. Mhm.
all of that as well. And then in addition, so those are the primary areas of work, but we do a lot of nonviolence training for Kurdish people who become training people to become trainers. And so that's our
Mhm.
other part of training them to do that because we work with people who are committed to nonviolent peacemaking and know that the ways of war and the ways of oppressing government is oppressive political powers is not the answer to anything they need. And then
Mhm.
but finally, the most important thing we do, we sit and drink tea and talk and listen to their stories. And so over and over and over again,
Ah. Uh-huh.
every village, every mountain home. I say these people, some of them who've never been out of the mountains or away from home, and so understand more about the geopolitics of the world and what's happening and how the U.S. is involved in that more than most United States. I say 95% of
Mhm. Mhm.
U.S. citizens will ever know and understand. They know it because it's their lives and they've seen it for so many generations. So so
Mhm.
that's what we do is that's how we get the stories and documentation and share that information. So and as we come in and sit and drink tea. And
Yeah,
but,
I can imagine. Yeah. I think in many cultures, that's the way you get information is by sitting and
yeah.
drinking tea. So now you wanted to tell a story from your last trip,
Oh,
you
yeah.
said.
So as our team has become more and more well known, particularly as we've accompanied the activists Kurdish activists and journalists who were oppressed by their own government and imprisoned and so on, and then accompany them through their trials and their families and all of that. And we've become more known. Um, our profile and impact in the Kurdistan region of Iraq has become more and more prominent. There is a kind of ceasefire. Turkey is still occupying part of Iraq, part of the Kurdish territory, still building bases and moving, but they're not attacking as much anymore. So there's an attempt at a peace process. And in this peace process, what we see every day now, we're talking about Iran, which is all a farce, a scam. It has nothing to do with peacemaking. It has to do with imperial regime domination.
Yep.
That's a huge story.
We don't talk about that, yes.
So as that happened, on the last day that I was there in November, after 6 weeks there, the last Saturday, I left on Sunday morning, there was a peace conference of Kurdish people, mostly local, some political people, and about 200 people, where my Kurdish teammate, Cameron, was so brilliant. So I'm trying to bring him to Seattle on the West Coast. That'll happen when we can do it. But because he's so articulate and good. He was one of the three speakers. The other two. This was like a 4 or 5 hour conference that we attended as a team with, Cameron was speaking and the other two. Then there was a break, and then there was a couple of hours of conversation around that. And for these couple of hundred Kurdish people, I mean, yeah, they're responding to raising all their concerns and so on. But the primary conversation that went on in that discussion revolved around or circulated through what CPT is doing and what Cameron had shared, because they know that the way of their path to peace is not going to depend on government leaders having some high profile talks with Turkey and establish a peace and so on. It's going to have to do with how the people respond, and it has to change the paradigm to a paradigm of peace, a paradigm of that we're all in this together, that we care about that. So that was there are things like that happening. And right now, what the team is under enormous impact because the U.S.-Israel war, another huge topic, on Iran, which is a war on Iran. Iran is lashing back at U.S. locations in Kurdistan and so on. So it impacts us there and the team and so on around these same issues. So we're needing to be much more careful. But it all comes back to saying the path to peace has to change the paradigm and the policies and the people about how we work on it and talk about it. And our team is seen as the model for doing that in that whole region.
Wow.
And here's what I was going to say.
That's wonderful.
In this current time, even the Kurdish prime minister of the current regime, we don't have strong, don't like very much, comes to CPT to find out where Iran is attacking in his own region. So even the current Kurdish regime is using our information to understand what's actually happening in the country that he leads.
Amazing. Now, another country that you've worked in is Palestine.
Yes.
Now, you talk about choosing the most challenging parts of the world to work in. Can you give us a little bit of an idea of your impressions of the situation in Palestine?
Yes. At first, in 2017, when I started, I went to the Iraq and Kurdistan team, and then to the Palestine team, and then back to, because they both needed help, and I wanted experience in both, and was trying to decide where I was needed most or felt, which is Iraq for a number of reasons. But I was very grateful to have the experience in Palestine, And then in 2018, with the Israeli oppression, they banned all our team members. Suddenly we had no team. Because you have to go out of the country and renew your visa and come back as internationals in a bizarre way. And they found out their CPTers wouldn't let anybody back in. So our team leader put out a call across CPT and said, can anybody come? And I said, hey, I'm an old white American U.S. citizen, Mennonite pastor, male, all the privileged ways. But when I go in, they ask me why I'm there, and I say, I came to the Holy Land to walk in the footsteps of Jesus. And I never get asked a question. I may be the only one who can get in. And older women that I'd worked with previously from Australia, older than most of our teammates, yeah, and I were the only two people who got in for 5 or 6 weeks. We were the team. So what we do there, based in Hebron, Old City Hebron, and there are checkpoints everywhere. Palestinians are so controlled. We're mostly walking in solidarity with Palestinian children going to school who have to go through checkpoints in the Old City, with soldier and settler oppression, which is constant and daily and everything. So we're documenting at the checkpoints nearest the schools, nearest us, every morning from 7 to 8:30 or 9. We're documenting every child, every person who comes through there, who's getting through, who's not, who they stop and search and question and arrest. And I've seen children arrested, every horrendous thing you can imagine. Children as young as 7 or 8, brutally arrested. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're the ones who accompany. We're the ones who document. We're the ones who provide the UN and the embassy, everybody else, the information, so that Israeli soldiers and settlers know somebody's watching, somebody's there, somebody's taking photographs, and so many, many, many stories. It's the most intensely, immediately oppressive place I've ever been. But I can leave. I have to leave. They can't. And so, and everywhere we are, we're always with children. So the heart of my message is twofold. And I give lots of CPT reasons. War is a lie, and war is war on children. Until we understand both of those things, we will never change the immense demonic oppression and war that's happening everywhere. And it's more evident than ever.
Yeah, it really is. How do you cope, Weldon, with my more limited exposure to violence and war? And, when you talked about the children, all I could see were these malnourished kids in the refugee camps on the Thai-Cambodian border. It stays with you for the rest of your life. But how do you cope, emotionally and spiritually in particular?
Thank you, Christine. That's very, very important. And there are no easy answers. Several things are really, really important. One is you cope because you see real people, families, children, everybody trying to survive in it. And it's much, much, much worse for them than it is for me. And I'm so inspired and grounded by their courage and resilience and stamina and just ability to survive and thrive in horrendous circumstances. Again, 1,000 stories and friends. I communicate, besides our Kurdistan team, which I'm constantly in touch with, and friends, Kurdish friends, I have Palestinian, Christian, and Muslim friends, at, every week, almost every day, getting information from what's happening in their lives today, how they're being attacked, and what it like. But so the people, just being with the people is one thing. You have to, if you're going to be there. But it all comes back again entirely to being spiritually formed and grounded in a liturgical community, uh, and all of that as well. So for example, my spiritual home in Kurdistan, I'll jump back and forth, Kurdistan, Palestine a bit here, is a very small monastery, which is a phenomenal place in itself, an ancient Chaldean monastery. And on Friday mornings, they have an English mass, and I preach for them, usually read the gospel or something, because every time I come, the priest always wants me to do something there, but just to go and worship with them, or go there to be there. We do a lot of our nonviolence trainings there, and so. But it's being with the communities that way. But then, in a broader sense, stepping back in the bigger picture of my life is the churches I've pastored and been with have been enormously formative. Seattle Mennonite Church, and now part of the time, First Mennonite Church of Reedley, California, where we are right now, part of the year. Bridge Folk, I helped found a Mennonite Catholic group called Bridge Folk, where people share the kinds of cares and compassion, concerns of the world, and CPT. But at heart, I'm a Benedictine Oblate, belong to St. John's Abbey and affiliated with St. John's Abbey in Minnesota, which is my deepest spiritual home. I say at heart, I am I'm a contemplative and monastic. I sometimes introduce myself as a Mennonite pastor and part-time monk. All of that is sustaining. I don't know. It's just, yeah, I can't imagine living life without all of that. I have a very simple. Being in the world, a monk in the world, is and pretty intensely active. Yet it doesn't often look like it. But I also have simple rhythms of life. I have an early morning ritual prayer I do in front of an icon of a Palestinian Jesus. The icon is written by a very dear, my spiritual director, and a very dear Ukrainian Catholic woman who's marvelous. Just those moments. Last thing I do at night and the first thing in the morning is to be there and go through that prayer. It's not. There's certainly not. It's not a methodology. It's a way of being and intention, desire, that is sustaining as well. And yeah.
It's very interesting to me. When I worked in refugee camps, it was the first time I got exposed to Henry Nouwen and contemplative practices, which have really grown in my life, and the connection to monastic rule of life and all of those things. And I think, it's my observation, and this is just a subjective observation, that these are the kinds of practices
Definitely.
and rhythms that we need in order to sustain ourselves in the midst of these horrendous things that we've been exposed to. Yeah,
for sure. I should mention, Henry Nouwen is very important to me, particularly earlier on in the 70s, 80s. I was with him 2 different occasions, once for a week retreat, which he led. Which was very, very important in those days. But the spiritual guide who's been most profoundly impacting on me is a Franciscan, Richard Rohr, is a personal friend.
Mm-hmm.
When I pastored in Cincinnati, he was still at New Jerusalem Community as founding priest there in the 70s, 80s. He still is a very dear friend and
Mm-hmm.
very
Oh,
formative.
and he has an amazing influence in such a wonderful
Yes.
way to so many people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure, around the
Mhm.
world and across faith traditions, so for me
Exactly.
personally, I mean, it's I've had fabulous, even other than Richard, mentors and teachers, companions across the years that they've been profoundly important to help
Mhm.
keep me grounded and sane and, and thriving, and so
Well, we certainly need that.
oh
We
yes,
can't do it. I like the way you started was talking about community, and we can't do it alone.
definitely.
We need mentors and then we need community. Those are those things. We do need our individual practices, but if we do them in isolation, I think.
Yeah, that's for sure. So yeah, that's very important. And so all those things are really important to me, and to maintain connections even when I can't be there or be with people like that. They're so much a part of my life all the time.
Mm, mm,
And they've grounded and shaped, formed me in ways that I don't even fully understand.
mm. Yeah, I'm sure that's so. The one other place I just wanted to touch on that you've been involved is, excuse me, on the in Arizona on the
Ah,
border.
yes,
Um, a different kind of situation in some ways, but also very similar. So just
yes.
before we end, let's give us a little bit of a glimpse of that too.
One of our arenas of work in CPT is uh, Turtle Island Solidarity Network, TISN, TISN. So we work in Canada, and I've been there with a team to help get delegations going there again a couple of years ago, 2 years ago now, actually, in May. Um, and then on the border 4 or 5 times. Friends of ours are CPT trained. It's not an official team, but we're Douglas Agua on the Arizona-Mexico border there in Arizona, Sonora, Mexico, where immigrants are coming through. It's mostly shut down now. The wall is being built and all of that. And then a year ago, last August, I led a CPT delegation there with Jack and Linda Knox, who are friends who've lived there now for. Jack was a Mennonite pastor, retired, and we knew them when he was a pastor. And they retired to go down there and live and be CPT trained and run it like that. So going down and working with them on several occasions, but then leading a delegation with them on the border with working with asylum seekers, immigrants coming through. There are various, particularly on the Mexican side, in Agua Prieta, um, agencies to CAME, both migrant centers, migrant resource centers, and shelters and places where people come to. And then, depending on what's happening, it's been an incredibly difficult past decade. Particularly with the enormous anti-immigration stuff and the closure of borders. I've been in Nogales on the border there, which is just south of Tucson and west of Agua Prieta. There's the other border that's busier and still functioning, but it's helping to understand what's happening, why people are coming to the border, where they're coming from, under enormous stress. The thing about going through the border that nobody understands here is I think it's highly distorted to think about immigration in the United States, our immigration policies as broken. No, we don't go back for it. Immigration happens, both of it, the positive and negative side of it, uh, as a result of overwhelming of war. In the last 12 years that I've been with CPT and in other parts of the world, I have watched with what the UN is documenting, the number of displaced people in the world overwhelmingly, because of war and war-related things, double from 60 million to 120 million now. And in the past couple of years, another 6 million people have been added to that. It's just enormous. And there are almost 350 million people, more than the population of the United States, in the world who are under severe stress and humanitarian need, most of that being unattended. We're contributing, how we contribute to the militarizing approaches around the world and at home to everything is the number one cause of why people are moving. So there's a paradox, a tragic paradox, of people being so severely oppressed and threatened and targeted and at risk in their own countries that the United States is both an attraction as a constitutional democracy and increasingly a threat. So we never ask the question about what are people fleeing from, what's happening, where, and how do we in the United States participate in that? How are we causing that movement of people, and why are they drawn to us? And we think about it in all the wrong ways, make all the wrong policies, and think that building a wall is going to change that. It's madness, utter insanity.
Yes. Oh dear.
I've seen
We
too
could
many
go on
people.
talking for hours, I think.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a horrible situation. I mean, as you talk about it, I know just from the little bit of personal experience I've had, we don't realize how we, and I'm not talking about us necessarily personally, but as nations, contribute to these terrible situations. And then instead of welcoming the people who are victims of them, we push them back, and it's like a double whammy of impact from both sides that we're contributing to. And as I said, we could go on for ages.
I want to say very quickly though, but one of the ways I got in the 1960s, maybe it was 1970s, that I got onto this and concerned about it is William Ryan wrote a book on blaming the victim. We're doing that more than ever.
Yes,
we
do.
Victimize the people who are being victimized. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, and we can see that all over the place.
Yes.
And it's just horrible.
Yeah.
We could do another whole session on that. But it's a good point to leave people with, is that recognition that we do need peacemakers who don't victimize the victims and don't make them seem as though they're the ones who are at fault. So
right.
Thank you, Weldon. This has been a wonderful introduction in some ways to the peacemaking work. And we'll make sure that in the notes we have how people can connect to both you personally, but also to the peacemaking teams, because I think it's such an important initiative. Yeah, that people need to be aware of. And
I could send you links.
Just so that we can get it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
Please
I'll do that.
Make sure we've got those links, and we'll make sure that they go in. So thank you very much for this. Really
welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. I would say salam and shalom. One of the things around the Middle East, it's assalamu alaikum, and then alaikum salam is the response. That's another way of being spiritually grounded and inspired by the abundant sharing of peace, even in very hard circumstances.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
In today's insightful conversation, I was speaking with Weldon Nisly, a seasoned peace activist and advocate, as he shared his extensive experience in peacemaking, global conflict zones, and the spiritual practices that sustain him. We discussed how faith, community, and nonviolent action intersect to foster peace in some of the world's most challenging environments. In the next episode, I will be in conversation with Reagan Sutterfield, Episcopal priest, serious birder, and author. His latest book, Watch and Wonder, which will be the focus of our discussion, explores the spirituality of birding and the deep wisdom Reagan has acquired through many years of watching, listening, and wondering about these incredible inhabitants of God's good world. I am not a birder, but was inspired by his integration of birding practices, biblical truths, and faith practices, and fascinated by the stories he tells. This is a conversation none of us should miss. I am Christine Syne, author, liturgist, keen gardener, and retired physician. My recent books include Celtic Advent, Following an Unfamiliar Path, and The Gift of Wonder, as well as Digging Deeper, The Art of Contemplative Gardening. I write regularly on Substack and conduct workshops and retreats about spiritual practices, Celtic Christian spirituality, and the spirituality of gardening and creation. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the podcast. Please also share it with your friends or join me on Substack, Instagram, or Facebook.